In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to break down 7 financial concepts that either are costing you money right now or will severely impact and or impede your financial future. With that said, let's get into it. As always, I have nothing to sell you, and all I ask is that you subscribe. Number 1 is the notion of saving money, right? And I know this sounds strange since obviously, versus spending money, saving money is preferable. And it's also very common advice like, hey, you should save money as opposed to wasting it on, say, your $6 Starbucks or so on. I want to touch on 2 concepts here. One is the actual utility of something like, say, buying a coffee a day. The other is saving versus investing money, right? Saving infers, say, taking it out in cash and putting it under your mattress or keeping it in a checking account, right? It infers a lack of use, right? The problem with that is inflation. It's that the real value of your money goes down if you don't do anything with that money, right? So inflation, let's say it's at 3%, right? That means all goods and services will be 3% more expensive next year, right? So if we have $1,000 in a checking account that's just sitting there, right? The next year, that $1,000 will only buy 3% less or $970 worth of goods. So in that way, you actually lose money if you quote unquote save it by just letting it sit, say, in a bank account or in cash or so on. The opposite of that is investing money, right? So as opposed to saving, investing money. Now, if you invest money, this happens, right? Compound growth or compound interest. And you probably heard of this, so I won't cover it much. All that means is your money makes money, and then the money your money makes more money, right? So let's say as opposed to 3% inflation, let's say you make 3% a year, even after inflation. Your $1,000 makes 3% next year, right? So you go from 1,000 to 1,030, but then that $30 also makes 3%, right? So the $30 makes, what, 90 cents? And then you make $30, so the 3% on the 1,000, plus you make your 90 cents, and then so on, and that grows just like this in a compound curve, right? And that really is how the rich, the wealthy make their money, right? It grows, it works for them over time. Now, the second concept on saving money, and why I think that's bad advice, is that we want to think about money in terms of utility, right? And I somewhat touched on this in a previous video. But let's say you have your $6 coffee, right? And every day when you go to work, you buy this $6 coffee. And you don't need it, and that's truly overpriced for coffee. But you really enjoy it, right? You wake up, you look forward to it, and it makes you productive for an hour, right? That $6, sure, that isn't what the coffee should cost. But if that gets you, say, 1 hour of productive work per day versus not being productive throughout that hour, and let's say a slight edge in terms of happiness, right? That all is utility, right? Let's say expected utility of that $6. Therefore, sure, you're spending $6 on something that should cost $6, but that $6 will ultimately more than pay for itself in a financial sense, right? Purely in a utility-based financial sense. And that, for varying reasons, that's why I think the advice of, hey, you should save your money by not spending it across the board, and also by just keeping it in cash, why that is bad advice, again, purely in a financial sense. Now, number 2, and this is somewhat similar and related, is the idea that being frugal will make you wealthy, right? This really just isn't true in that wealth really is a function of income, right? It's a function of income, and then it's a function of investing. And for most people, there's a certain amount of money they can save because there's a certain amount of money they make, right? The vast majority of the population in the US and the world, let's say, makes $50K a year. With that $50,000, right, you have to pay for rent, you have to pay for food, you have to pay on, say, dates for your partner or your kids, right? You have all these expenses that you have to pay for with that $50K. Sure, you can make your life worse by spending less money. You can cut down on food, you just don't travel. You can do all those things, right? You can save an extra 5% a year. That 5% a year, e.g. being frugal, right, that will help you somewhat, but is that really going to make you wealthy, right? No. You used to need, say, $1 million to retire. Now that number's at about $3 million to comfortably retire. By the time, say, if you're under the age of 30, you're going to be 50, 60, that's going to be $4 or $5 million you need to retire. If you're making $50K a year, if you're making minimum wage, right, you can save 5% less or 5% more all you want. That's not going to get you to the 5 million mark, right? That's an exponential curve that looks like this, right? So really it is a function of income. It's let me get that 50K up to 70K, and then let me just save an extra 20. And $20,000 a year for 40 years, right? That will help you really hit the financial marks you need to go to, right, to actually get you to that point of financial freedom, right? So as opposed to being frugal, and again, this ties back to expected utility, focus on raising income. And again, that's the difference between let me try and cut down on food this month and save an extra $100 versus, okay, let me think about a way to make an extra $100 this month and so on, and then that turns into $1,000 and so on. And again, this somewhat varies, right? If you make $200,000 a year and you spend 80 grand of that on completely unnecessary things, sure, right? Save some money and invest that. That really will make you money down the line. But if it comes down for you to, saving an extra $100 this month, that's fantastic, really. But that will not make you the $5 million you need to retire, right? That will give you some money down the line, and that's better than not, right? But what really will get you to that point of financial freedom is just bringing up the income. Now, number 3 is the notion that all debt is bad. And I did a full hour-long breakdown on this. You can see that video right here on the top of the screen. And I'll just summarize that right now. Debt generally breaks down into good debt and into bad debt. This is a productive way of looking at debt, right? Debt inherently is a form of leverage, right? It's, okay, let me use other people's resources and money in a financial sense to do things that I want, right? And that's why people use it to, say, buy a house with a mortgage or a car or so on, or get a loan to start a business. Those are all forms of debt. Debt really lets you leverage resources that you couldn't otherwise, say like buying a house while only putting 10% or 20% down. And then also accelerate returns, right? Since if I have to only spend $200,000 to buy a $1 million house instead of $1 million in cash, I can use that $800,000 to go do other things, right? So you're making more money per unit of your money, at least in that investment. And again, that's all in the other video. So generally, good debt is debt that buys you assets, that makes you money. Bad debt is debt that buys you liabilities or things that cost you money. So if you take on debt, right, to start a business, to buy a house, to do all these things that will make you more money and bring you more value down the line, great. That debt is awesome. The bad debt and the debt that royally screws people over is, okay, let me get into credit card debt to buy a watch, right? That will screw you over. That is bad debt. Do not do that. But generally, the notion that debt is bad is horrible advice. It's an extremely powerful financial tool that everyone uses, that the world really runs upon. And again, that's all broken down in that other video. So just watch that if you want or don't. But just bottom line is debt is not bad. It's just about how you use it. This fourth idea and bad piece of advice is that money won't make you happy, right? There is truth to that, right? But the notion, the idea that money will definitively not make you happy is very much false. And I want to think about what actually do you value in life, right? What matters? And here, let me move this value over to here, right? Let's say love, family, and again, I'm just going off the top of my head, but health and freedom and travel, right? Let's say these are the things that actually, matter in life. Money is false, right? It's pieces of paper, it's number on a screen. Money doesn't actually matter, right? But let's say these are the things that you actually care about in your life. And let's just add happiness onto the bottom, right? So happiness generally is a catch-all. I think for most people will agree, happiness breaks into things like, okay, I have a great partner, I love my kids, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, and so on. So let's say these are the things that actually matter apart from money, right? Then let's ask the question, well, does money enable or does money make these things more difficult, right? If I have money versus not having money, with everything else as a constant, will I be better off or worse off in pursuing these things, right? An easy case is health. if you have more money, right, you can buy better quality food, you can pay for a gym membership or a personal trainer. Generally, your health will be better off if you have money than not having money, right? So health, you're better off having money. Say traveling, right? Obviously, if you have more money, you can pay for travel, you can take time off work, etc. You're better off, right? Freedom, same thing. If you don't have money, you have to work for money. You have to spend your time making that money. That is inherently somewhat a bound on your time, right? So if you have money, you are more free, right? Then in terms of your family, right? Let's say you want to send your kids to school, right? Or your wife got hurt, she has cancer. You need to pay for her medical bills, right? Your family is going to be better off if you have money versus not having money, right? Love. Love matters. It's not a function of money, and it's not to say, again, that without money you can't say find love, but are you going to be better off? Are you going to have more time? Can you afford dates? Can you do nice things? Can you go on a honeymoon, right? If you have money or if you don't have money. You generally will be better off, regardless of all other factors, if you have money when it comes to, say, finding love or sustaining a healthy relationship. And if happiness breaks down into all of these things, you are better off having money versus not. That is not necessarily true, right? There's one more thing we have to consider. Sure, you're better off having money than not when it comes to all these things, and I think everyone can agree on that. But then it's a function of, well, if money contributes to these things, what do we put in to get money, right? So let's say we put in X amount of hours, Y amount of effort into making money, right? Then we really just have to weigh these two sides of the equation. What we're really doing, and the real question of money versus happiness isn't about money. It's about what do we put into money, and then what do we get out of money, right? Money is just the tool. Really, it's the time and effort we put into it, and then what we get out of it in terms of what actually matters in life. And that is the question of, well, is money worth it, right? Should we put effort toward money? Should we not? And in that way, the general notion of, hey, money is bad, money will not make you happy is really just false, right? Because theoretically, right, let's say you can put in no time and no effort and make $1 million a year. Well, if you have $1 million a year, you can travel more. You're likely, statistically speaking, to be healthier. You have time for family. You can take time off work and so on. So then just walk that back. What if it's 2 hours a week, right? What if it's a little more effort, right, every day? So it really is a function of what you put into money. And in that sense, I think most people would agree that it makes sense if you're confident in your ability to, say, make more money, if you put more effort or time into money for a few years, to do so, right? If you're 20 or if you're 18, let's say, starting a business, reading some books, taking community college classes, right? Doing those things to bring you from, say, $40,000 a year income potential to $80,000 a year, right? That 2 years of extra effort and time, that's worth it to you, right? For all these things. And then for some people, at a certain point, it's not worth it, right? To put in 80 hours a week for 30 years, right? For all of these things. So this, I think, is really how you systematically approach that question of, well, does money make you happy? And that notion of, hey, money won't make you happy is just erroneous in that if people ignore money, right, they don't get any of the benefits of it. If they don't do the basic things that ensure financial health and safety and freedom, right, they will be screwed over in a lot of ways, and that's just the world we live in. Okay, now number 5 here relates to actually starting a business, right? Now this ties somewhat into the digital entrepreneurship space and a lot of the online influencers. So, if you're older, you're out of sort of that circle, this may make less sense for you. For anyone pretty much under the age of 30 who is attuned, right, to sort of digital entrepreneurship, this will make a lot of sense. And this relates to business models, right? And there's always a business model that there's hype around, right? There was, let's say, e-commerce and drop shipping, right? And crypto, and what else? Let's say AI, and even something like fintech, right? That is a hype cycle as well, or SaaS, or software as a service, right? All these things are hype business models, right? There's a lot of digital content about them. Everyone's like, hey, this is the thing to jump into. You're going to make a lot of money, right? Again, right now that's AI, used to be drop shipping, and so on. The problem and the notion that of this whole space is that it assumes that some new model is going to come around, like AI, and then you can jump into it and make a bunch of money, and then just get out and you're set, right? Really what that says is, oh, I can get lucky, I can take advantage of something before everyone else does, get really rich, and then I'm done, right? That is fundamentally a horrible way to approach money and wealth and business and entrepreneurship as a whole. Rather, the way to do it is, well, you should put in effort over time. You should get really, really good at what you do. And I think the notion there is, people ask like, oh, is dropshipping dead? Is e-commerce dead? Is self-publishing or crypto? What if the models are just dead, right? The models never die. These are really all solid business models. AI is great. Dropshipping is useful if done correctly. Same with fintech and SaaS and crypto. Fundamentally, the business models were successful once, right? Because they are valuable if done correctly. Therefore, if none of these models are dead, it's really just, let me get really, really good at any one of these models versus jumping into the next one. And that is much more systematic. That's saying, hey, let me get really good at one specific thing. Let me learn how to provide value and create something of value and build, a product or a service that people actually want and are willing to pay for, right? And then let me get really, really good at that one thing and make a bunch of money that way, right? That is a systematic way that actually works when it comes to wealth generation. And approaching it like, okay, let me just jump into the next model, you will long run fail if that's how you approach finance as a whole. That is somewhat less personal finance related, than the rest of this video, but I see a lot of young people doing that, right? Like your 15, 16, 20-year-olds. They're like, let me jump into the agency model, let me jump into e-commerce, right? And then they just do that for a few months, it doesn't work for them, and then they go on to the next thing. If you just keep going on to the next thing, you'll ultimately be screwed over. Rather, just choose any one of those things, right? And go really deep into that thing. You will be so much better off that way versus just jumping along here like this, right? Now, number 6, right, and this is more of a straightforward financial concept, is the idea that you are much better off researching your own investments. That sounds so incredibly logical, but I think the problem is if someone says X investment is great, right? Like your friend says, hey, this meme coin, this altcoin is great, right? Or this stock is awesome, you should invest in it. Anything like that, then you're probably going to have a bad time with that. Or at least if you repeat this, say, experiment 100 times over and you listen to that advice 100 times out of 100, right, you're going to generally lose on average, right? We can think of people investing in a few ways, right? We have fundamental analysis or investing. We have hype investing, so going off hype cycles, and then we have technical investing or going off patterns and chart movements, right? So generally people invest either via fundamental analysis, technical analysis, or hype analysis, right? Going off your friend giving you advice about a stock or something like that is really hype analysis. It's, oh, you heard about this from someone else, you're doing no research, and then you're jumping on that bandwagon. They can say whatever they want, right? But you haven't done your own research. You don't really know what you're doing, right? Hype analysis generally will lose you money. That's not a great way of approaching investments. Technical analysis too, on paper, generally loses your money, right? Like your day traders, your crypto traders, and so on average, out of say 100 people that try that for say, over the course of a year, they will lose money, right? The real way that most people, most especially wealthy people and institutions approach investing, whether it's real estate, whether it's stocks, debt instruments, starting a business, etc., it's via fundamental analysis. It is, what are the fundamental determinants of the success of this asset or business, right? What's the risk and so on, and then what am I going to get out of that? So if you just take advice from anyone on like, oh, hey, you should throw $100 or $1,000 into this call, right, or this, this asset, whatever it may be, or this project, this NFT, and so on, you will long run be screwed over. Generally, right? Find your own investments, do your research on those investments, and you will be better off that way. Now, number 7 is a very sort of basic financial concept, and this just relates to your credit score. And I did touch on this in the debt video as well, but this is the idea that, hey, your credit score really matters, right? Your credit score is equivalent to your trust score. It is a bank and an institution figuring out and analyzing, say, how much should I trust this person with my money, right? The more they trust you, the cheaper debt or loans become, right? And the cheaper debt and loans become, the more you can do, the more money you can get at a lower interest rate, and then you end up making more money, right? Like let's say we want to buy a house, it costs $1 million. If you have a high credit score, banks trust you, so you can get more debt, you can get cheaper debt, you can get it at say a 1% interest rate. With a 1% interest rate on $1 million house, you're just paying $10,000 a year to own that house, right? Initially on the $1 million. It's more complicated than that than in a literal sense, but let's just say $10,000, right? Meanwhile, if you have a low credit score, that debt is going to be expensive, let's say a 4% interest rate, and then you're going to have less money because now you have to pay $40,000 a year instead of $10,000 a year just to own that house or to buy it with debt. So in that way, credit scores really matter. Now, one very common piece of bad financial advice there is to just pay the minimum, right, on debt, right? So let's say I spent $400 this month on a credit card and the minimum payment is $40, right? What people very often do and what they tell people to do is, hey, you should just pay $40 off the 400, right? And then next month, if that goes to 450, right, well, I should just pay $50, right? Really, you will always be better off with your credit score if you just pay the entire balance down, right? So if you spend $400 this month on a credit card, right, pay your 400, go to zero, spend 400, pay 400, go back to zero, and so on and so forth, right? Generally, if you pay in full the balance on your credit vehicles or your debt vehicles like a credit card, you will have a higher credit score, you'll get cheaper debt, and you'll ultimately make more money. Now, those are the 7 tips. I do have a number of books that I've written about concepts like these and those of related domains that are available completely for free. There's a Google Drive link in the description. You just click on that, and they're just PDFs or docs. You can just download those and read them if you want. No pressure to do so. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you want to see, and I will see you in the next one.